It's obvious that something is wrong with the mainstream media. Turn on cable news at any given moment and you'll get a dose of the poison.
You know there's no widespread voter fraud, and yet you keep stirring the lie up.
The insurrectionist in chief is back in the news this week. You remember Donald Trump.
You're nothing but a punk.
Yeah.
You're a punk, Bongino. You're a punk.
It's not hard to see that the mainstream media is broken. The venom it spews every hour of every day has created an instability in America, the likes of which we haven't seen in generations. How do we fix this? How do we fix our broken media? To find the answer, we tell the story of how the first 24-hour TV news network was born and how they exploited a tactic that changed the way we consume the news. This is Red Pilled America.
There is perhaps no one more responsible for today's media atmosphere than retired media mogul Ted Turner.
I did not want to be a fringe player in the broadcasting business.
That's Ted Turner in 2001.
I wanted to be the dominant number one player, and we were there.
When Ted Turner launched CNN in 1980, he was the dictionary definition of an underdog.
Everybody thinks Bill Gates is so smart, and I think he's smart too. But basically, he had some competition, but the field was wide open. The computer software field was pretty wide open when he started. But when we started, the three broadcast networks were thousands of times bigger than we were. The television broadcasting business was filled with three gigantic competitors that were already well entrenched and had been in business for over 30 years. So it was very, very difficult.
And yet, less than 20 years after the launch of CNN, he became one of the most influential media moguls in American history. How did he do it? Well, he used a tactic that corporate media is still exploiting today. Ted Turner was born in 1938 and was left by his parents to live with his grandmother at the age of 3. By the time he was 6 years old, he was shipped off to Cincinnati boarding school, living the majority of his childhood away from parental affection every child needs. Ted formed an eccentric personality. He was a crass dreamer, always searching for the approval he didn't get from Dad. By the time he was 9, Ted was constantly in trouble. So his father sent him to a military boarding school just 20 miles southeast of Atlanta, Georgia. The change seemed to whip him into shape, and he fell in love with this region of the South.
I could see this was going to be the hub of the South, and this is where the action was going to be. It's really a very nice place to live.
Ted would later go off to Brown University, but before he graduated, he was expelled for having a female student in his dormitory. By 1960, Ted's father Ed had a burgeoning billboard advertising business, but the pressure of the company's debt proved to be too much for him to take. And in March 1963, Ed placed a revolver to his head and he pulled the trigger. Ted was shocked. The man that he thought was the epitome of confidence took a cowardly way out. Just 24 years old at the time, Ted moved to Atlanta and took over his father's billboard business. His savvy, even cutthroat nature in business affairs stood out immediately. He wrestled the company into massive profitability. In the late 1960s, Ted Turner began buying radio stations in the South. But that wasn't enough. He saw the enormous upside of advertising and he wanted a new platform to increase sales. So he looked to TV. And in 1969, Ted Turner purchased an independent TV station in Atlanta. Some of Ted's staff would later reminisce about the early days of the station.
We were number 6 in a 4-station market.
It went off the air about 3 times a day because we didn't have a transmitter that would stay on.
In the early 1970s, regulators required that all TV stations broadcast at least 40 minutes of local news a day. But news was an expensive endeavor that required a huge staff, capital, and resources. And Ted didn't really like the news industry that much anyway.
Well, I couldn't afford news. And besides, I thought the news was pretty negative anyway and pretty biased. I watched it a little bit, but I didn't want Walter Cronkite telling me how to think.
All of the TV behemoths like CBS, ABC, and NBC were all broadcasting their required news shows in the early evenings when people were getting off of work. Ted's staff would later recall the situation.
But the only thing was, we didn't want to put it on at 6 o'clock at night. We were making too much money with shows like Beverly Hillbillies and Andy Griffith and those things, the situation comedies.
Early evening was prime advertiser real estate where stations could charge top dollar. Ted's team knew they couldn't compete with the news operations of the major networks, so why even try?
So we just stuck our news show in the middle of the night. It ran at 3:30, and there was no budget for it. So we just started to play with it. We had fun doing it. We had a guy that was called the Unknown Newsman that would do stories with a paper bag on his head. One night I did it with a dog as my co-anchor. It was just an insane news show, but it caught on with a lot of people.
At the time, Ted Turner was the kind of guy that was always looking to grow his station, so he became an early adopter of new technologies. In the 1970s, that was cable TV. The problem with cable was that it wasn't installed throughout the country. It was mainly outside of the major metropolitan areas. To reach the areas that didn't have cable, he'd either have to lay cable himself or install expensive microwave towers all over the country to distribute his signal. But that's when another technology came into play.
In the mid-1970s, Ted Turner read a new cable network, HBO, was looking to distribute its TV station through a satellite.
And when I read about the satellite, the communication satellite, I said, hey, wait a minute. This is an antenna 22,000 miles up in space that can cover the whole North American continent. And we can go point, multi-point to every cable operator in the country. And if we put compelling enough programming on that satellite, then we can get cable operators to start in the major metropolitan areas, and we can wire the whole country and have a national medium, and eventually we'll get to 80% penetration. Then we compete with CBS, NBC, and ABC and make billions.
He filed an application with the government and got a distribution permit. Through satellite, his small Atlanta station could now reach the 24 million cable TV homes across America. His station would come to be known as Superstation WTBS, later reduced to just TBS. Ted recalls this wild, wild west time.
We had to write the rules as we went along because we were doing something that nobody done before. We were like Christopher Columbus. When he left Spain to seek the New World, he didn't know where he was going when he left. He didn't know where he was when he got there, and he didn't know where he'd been when he got back.
The Superstation was becoming one of the most profitable stations in the country. Now, as he came up with this idea to use a satellite, another concept popped up in his mind.
Before we even got up on the satellite, I was thinking, what would be the next channel? That just hit me right in the face that the next best thing would be a 24-hour news channel, a news channel that was available all the time. I didn't know what it was going to cost, but I said we're going to start in 11 months.
So he sold off his new assets to raise the $20 million that he thought he'd need to launch this new venture. He announced it on April 23, 1979.
We are also looking into the creation of a news alternative for cable subscribers. This news service will be called the Cable News Network and will program continually updated half-hour segments of national news, business news, sports, and features 24 hours a day. I know that we will succeed, and I pledge to you that we will not let the American public down.
In hindsight, a 24-hour news network seemed like an obvious idea. There were already radio stations with around-the-clock news programming, but no one made the move to TV, including the major news networks.
Nobody even suggested it until after we announced we were going to do it, and then some people thought, gee, maybe this is a good idea.
His team began selling the Cable News Network, or CNN, to local cable providers.
I figured if we put cable in the first name, it would have been very confusing for the person answering the phone at the cable company to say, no, we don't carry the Cable News Network. You know, I thought it would be confusing enough to where it would help us get more carriage, and it did.
Now, even with $20 million, the startup news operation didn't budget enough for staff. So his senior producer, Ted Kavanaugh, came up with an idea.
So I said, hey, let's do this. Let's go to the colleges and grab kids who were in TV classes there, and we'll teach them how to use this equipment and everything else.
They grabbed kids from the Ivy League, some from the South. They set up in a nearby hotel and put the kids through what they called CNN College. The second they brought in new equipment, they'd give the new recruits the manual and told them to figure it out. The president of CNN at the time, Reese Schoenfeld, talked in the early 80s about the philosophy behind this approach.
I believe in American television, it takes about 6 weeks to train an average bright student to be as good as someone who's been in the business 6 or 10 years. And I realize that's a harsh thing to say, but the state of the art has gotten very simple indeed.
This ragtag operation was trying to launch the first 24-hour global cable news outlet in 1 year. It seemed like an impossible task. They started poaching veterans from the major news networks and began rehearsing their broadcasts as their set was being constructed in the WTBS Superstation building.
Our day watch experts on teenagers are appropriately enough, we think, teenagers.
Behind the scenes, there was chaos, but Ted Turner was putting on a good face to the public.
One reason I'm pursuing this thing as strongly as I am is not just for us, but I think the people of America need this in-depth news service, and I'm willing and have been willing all along to risk everything that I have to provide that service.
In a little over a year from announcing their venture, CNN launched on June 1st, 1980, with the message from their founder.
We hope that the cable news network, with its international coverage and greater depth coverage, will bring together in brotherhood and kindness and friendship and in peace the people of this nation and this world.
They switched to the newsroom, and the first 24-hour TV news network was born.
Stand by, ready, 3, take 3, my cue. 3, start to slow zoom in a little bit. Roll tape, take 3. Ready, 13, full. Ready, camera 3, 1 center up.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Lois Hart. Now here's the news.
Watching CNN's footage from those early days, you could still detect a slight liberal bias in the stories they chose to cover, but it wasn't obnoxious. At the time, Ted talked about their philosophy.
Our editorial policy is to present the news as it is. And when there's contrasting viewpoints on controversial issues, we seek out the leading proponent of each side and get them to air their views, and then let the American people that are watching make up their own mind as to which they want to believe. That's my philosophy.
But even if there was an early attempt to be even-handed, liberal bias was built into their business model. Much of its staff came from Ivy League schools, all hotbeds of progressive thought even in the 1980s. And to staff up, CNN was plucking talent from the major news networks that were teaming with liberals.
Welcome to our bureau in downtown Dallas.
Welcome to California. I'm Mark Walton. This is Bob Berkowitz.
I'm Kirsten Lindquist. I'm Mary Alice Williams, New York bureau chief for the Cable News Network.
The fledgling 24-hour news network slowly grew its subscribers, eventually becoming profitable in 1986. They covered big events like the Challenger explosion.
You saw it just a few moments ago, about 45 seconds after liftoff, a huge fireball in the sky.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that.
But it wasn't until 1987 that CNN would find the kind of news story that would change media forever.
It was October 14th, 1987. An 18-month-old Jessica McClure was playing in her Midland, Texas backyard. The phone rang in the house, and her mother walked in to answer it. In that brief window of time, tragedy struck. There was a small 8-inch diameter abandoned well in the backyard. Somehow a rock that was covering the opening was moved, and little Jessica fell down the well. CNN heard the developing story being covered by the local news and decided to send a camera crew. Initially, the team didn't think much of the story.
Initially, when we got the call and said we were going, I thought, well, a girl in a well, she'll probably be out by the time we get there.
When they arrived, they set up in the neighbor's backyard. They borrowed a ladder from another neighbor and set up their camera to film the rescue.
She appears to be doing all right, considering. Cameras and microphones have been dropped down. Jessica can be heard to call to her mother. She has been singing, humming, and occasionally crying.
The rescuers learned that Jessica was wedged 22 feet down the well. Her legs were in kind of the splits, with her right foot above her head. Because of the size of the hole, it became apparent that they weren't going to be able to just reach down and pull her out. CNN's camera crew thought they'd have baby Jessica out of the well in maybe a few hours, but 2 hours turned to 4, then 8, then 12. As CNN was filming the unfolding drama, film crews from other networks began arriving.
They got a little taller ladder so they could peek over the first guys, and the later guys got even taller ladders, and it was like a grandstand tier.
Before you know it, there were news organizations from every corner of the world covering that story.
The entire world was captivated by the rescue. As 12 hours turned to 16, then 24, Americans wanted to watch every second of the dire situation. But the major networks were cutting away for their regularly scheduled programming. For anyone that wanted to watch every second of the rescue, the only place to see it was on CNN. So viewers flocked to the 24-hour news network.
She hasn't had anything to eat or drink for more than a day, but medical personnel on the scene say they don't want anything passed down to her for fear she'll choke. Friends and neighbors have come here offering their prayers and support for the McClures.
In Jesus' name, we pray for your help. Amen.
As Hour 56 arrived, the rescue climaxed, and CNN was the only news outfit that was broadcasting every moment live.
It looks like they're bringing her up right now. We're seeing a lot of activity. The ropes are being pulled up. You can see the cable coming up. Everyone's eyes are looking down. You can see the enthusiasm. You could hear the applause as Jessica is brought out the smiles. It has taken a long time. We've been on a roller coaster of emotion, and this is certainly the high point.
By the time baby Jessica was saved, the major networks were broadcasting the drama. But CNN was the only network that carried every moment of the rescue. The fledgling cable news network had arrived. A year and a half later, in 1989, Ted Turner was interviewed by the Washington Post, and he said something that would inadvertently reveal CNN's business model. When asked by the reporter why CNN didn't originate more stories, Ted Turner misinterpreted the question and responded, quote, "I jokingly said this when we started CNN that we were going to buy a couple of hotels that were going to be wrecked and on a slow day just set them on fire and let the cameras shoot the hotel burning." He continued stating, quote, "And the highest rating CNN ever had was when the little girl was pulled out of the well. And we jokingly said what we'd do was put candy bars on the edges of all the old wells," end quote. In other words, if there was no news, CNN would manufacture it.
Over the years that followed, CNN would cover events in a way that seemed to put Ted Turner's perverse joke into action. At times, they appeared to welcome war, treating it almost as if it were a movie.
The first war in the last decade of the 20th century.
They instigated racial conflict by broadcasting the accusations of people that had zero credibility.
Everyone keeps calling me a witness, and they're trying to misuse the fact that I am also a victim. I was not just standing feet away from Big Mike, I was standing side by side. I could have been shot just as well if I didn't duck for cover.
CNN found the secret sauce. Create long narratives that fill the airwaves, even if you have to place candy bars near open wells to manufacture the news. Which leads us back to the question, how do we fix our broken media? Well, the first step is to turn it off. Turn off 24-hour corporate cable news. When Ted Turner created the perpetual news desk, he created a monster that constantly needs to be fed. Today's so-called journalists use whatever tactic necessary to fill the airwaves with narratives that can feed the beast for days, months, or even years.
The Russians offered help, the campaign accepted help. The Russians gave help, and the president made full use of that help.
Adam Schiff, the top Democrat, saying there is significant evidence of collusion.
Adam Schiff saying there is, quote, significant evidence of collusion.
Special counsel Robert Mueller submitted his final report and concluded that Donald Trump and his campaign did not collude with Russia during the 2016 election.
The far-left news industry pushes hoax stories to create long narratives. Weapons of mass destruction, Russiagate, the January 6th insurrection, hands up, don't shoot. Biden is coherent. They use these fake narratives to fill their airwaves. And all along the way, they downplay or spike practically every story that goes against their manufactured narrative. And CNN is not alone in this tactic. The far-left cable news and corporate conservative media make money off you watching them fight. But they are two sides of the same coin. Don't be a part of their game. Exit the coin toss. Turn it all off. Then start supporting the truth tellers and independent media.